right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today, we are going to start down the journey of sacrifice. Specifically, sacrificing part of our immortal soul to a being of great power so we can do cool magical stuff. And by that, I mean we are going to be looking at the new class options for the Warlock that were introduced in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Now, normally with these episodes, I will do the first episode of a class will be the optional, the new optional features plus one of the new subclasses, and Warlock actually has probably the most complex new optional features of any subclass other than the Ranger and maybe the Fighter. So to prevent myself from having an hour or hour and a half long of a video, this video is just going to cover the optional class features for the Warlock. Now, just to give a kind of brief refresher on how 5th edition class design works, as I do in every one of these videos. In 5th edition, every single class is meant to play very, very differently. And they're meant to play very, very differently right from the beginning. They do this by having things that we call defining features of the class. And those defining features should show up within the first two levels. For the Warlock, the defining features... first of all, is what's called Pact magic, is a defining feature. Basically, what it is Warlocks cast spells different than literally every other spellcaster in the game. With as much as, clerics and druids and wizards have kind of different ways that they get their spells and, different ways that they may interact with their spell slots. For the most part, they use the exact same system to do it. They have spell slots, they have spells that they get to prepare. The list that they prepare those spells from differs depending on the class, but for the most part, they wake up, they prepare some spells, and then they can fit them into their spell slots however it works. Pact magic doesn't work that way. First things first, Warlocks only ever have a maximum of 4 spell slots. So unlike literally any other full casting class, which will get, until you get to really, really high levels, will eventually get 4 spell slots in every level spell, all the way up to around level 8 spells, I believe, are where it starts dropping off, where you never would be able to get 4 level 8 spells. It might also be for 7th, but I can't remember. Warlocks only have a total of 4 spell slots. Now, those spell slots level up as they do. So, for example, a 2nd level Warlock has 2 first level spell slots. However, a 4th level Warlock has 2 2nd level spell slots. And a 10th level Warlock would have 2 5th level spell slots. So again, the Warlock has less spell slots, but they quite literally cannot cast a first level spell at first level once they get their 2nd level spot. So they're always casting their spells are their first to fifth level spells at the highest level possible. In addition to that, every other spellcasting class gets their spells back on a long rest. Warlocks get them back on a short rest. So that means Warlocks, while yes, they have less total spells they can cast, that also means they can technically cast them more often as long as they can get short rest. They are a very short rest focused class. Because of their limited spell slots, Warlocks also rely very heavily on their cantrips to do a lot of their magic damage. And so getting used to and using your Warlock cantrips effectively is really important. The other defining feature of the Warlock are what are called Eldritch Invocations. These are kind of modifications that you get for spells and abilities and things like that that permanently kind of modify how your Warlock plays. At second level, you get to choose 2, and as you level up, you learn more invocations that modify different things. To give you an example, Agonizing Blast is a really, really popular one. It basically, whenever you cast Eldritch Blast, which is a cantrip, it allows you to add your Charisma modifier to the damage to it, effectively turning it into the equivalent of a weapon attack. And what I mean by that is, let's say a fighter goes in and it attacks something with its longsword. Well, a longsword would use your strength modifier for your attack and damage rolls. So when he hit, he'd do 1d8 damage plus his strength modifier. For spells, though, and cantrips, you generally don't add anything to the damage. You just get to add your spellcasting ability to the attack roll. So Agonizing Blast effectively turns a cantrip into something more akin to a weapon attack. And because of the unique properties of Eldritch Blast, where cantrips level up as you get higher levels and they do more damage. The thing with Eldritch Blast is instead of just, doing additional damage by adding an additional damage die, it actually fires multiple blasts as you level up. So with the fact that you get to add your Charisma modifier every time you hit with Eldritch Blast, that means when you're firing 2 bolts, each one of those bolts is going to get your Charisma modifier to it. Effectively, again, making it very similar to how a warrior attacks. And that's kind of how the Eldritch Invocations will work, is they will choose a spell or give you an ability, and they will make it so that it works differently than any other class that would try to use that spell or that ability. Sometimes, like Ascendant Step, lets you cast Levitate on yourself at will without expending a spell slot or material components. Those are really common where, again, because Warlocks have such limited use of their spell slots, a lot of the times they will get utility spells like Levitate or Mage Armor or Speak with Animals, and they will get Eldritch Invocations that allow them to cast them for free. So because of that, Warlocks in general tend to be these super hyper customizable classes, spellcasting classes that behave very, very differently to any other spellcaster. And it's one of the things that makes them so cool. So let's go into the actual optional class features here. So, first optional class feature for every spellcasting class. Thank you, phone. For every spellcasting class into Tasha's is additional spells. This is effectively how they get access to the new spells that have been introduced into Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. And it lets you kind of fill some holes that were left in the original class. A lot of times, these new additional spells are going to give you access to spells that existed before, but just were never added to that particular class list for one reason or another. The interesting thing about the Warlock spells is they get 20 new spells added to their spell list, which is cool. One of the larger number of spells of any of the spellcasting classes. However, only 5 of those are old spells that have just kind of been reappropriated so that a Warlock can use them. So 3/4 of the spells are brand new. That may have something to do with the fact that Tasha is a little bit more along the lines of the Eldritch spellcaster. I don't believe Tasha is an actual Warlock. Actually, I'm not 100% certain what her class is. But she does have a lot in common. Like she's known as a witch and the things like that. She does have a lot more in common with kind of the themes of the Warlock compared to a lot of other spellcasting classes. So it kind of makes sense that I think almost every new spell in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything shows up in here, or at least the vast majority of new spells are on the Warlock's spell list. So that's kind of cool. In addition to that, they get 5 spells that exist in other ones, and they make sense for the most part. To be perfectly honest, it is 5. To be perfectly honest, 3 of them are just movement spells. You have Teleportation Circle, Giga Gate, or 2 of them are. So Teleportation Circle and Giga Gate literally just allow you to move vast distances. Planar Binding effectively just allows you to bind an elemental or a fae or a fiend to your service, which really fits with the Warlock, and I don't know why they wouldn't have had that before. Mislead is probably one of my favorite underutilized spells, because it's effectively you become invisible and a double of you runs from your position to make it look like you ran away when you're there. There's so many different ways you can use it that are a lot of fun. And then the final one is Weird, which is just a weird illusion spell that's weird. I can't really. It's a 9th level illusion spell. So look up this as a spell on your own, but the name Weird fits. And that definitely fits the kind of theme of Warlocks in general. So overall, I like the new spells. Again, I am such a huge fan of the new summon spells in Tasha's, and I believe the Warlock gets access to every single one of them. So in Fae, Shadow Spawn, Undead, Aberration, and Summon Fiend. So you can kind of create a pet class version of the Warlock using these new spells and some of the other, excuse me, some of the other aspects of the new subclasses. So yeah, overall super cool, super interesting. 3rd level gives a new Pact boon. Now, Pact boon, the only reason we don't call Pact boon a defining feature of the Warlock is it shows up at 3rd level, and defining features have to show up at 1st and 2nd level. It's kind of like Paladin auras or the Monk Stunning Strike. They are, really important and unique to that particular class. However, they show up so late, we don't really call them defining features. They are just kind of specialized features. Pact boons are that way for Warlocks. And basically what they do is they will kind of modify a certain aspect of the Warlock themselves. The Pact boons, I'm actually going to look up. Seriously, I have to go through all the different Eldritch, of course. All right, Pact. There we go. So the Pact boons. You have Pact of the Blade, Pact of the Chain, Pact of the Tome, and there's going to be a new pact that they introduce. This is here. So, the Pact of the Blade effectively allows you to have a magic melee weapon. You kind of become the Pact of the Blade was kind of a poor man's version of the Hexblade, which was a specialized version of Warlock from previous editions that had a sword that was a weapon granted by their Pact Master that they could do cool stuff with. The Pact of the Blade kind of lets you do that in a lesser form until the actual Hexblade Pact was created in Xanathar's. I think it was Xanathar's. Yeah, so you have Pact of the Blade, you get a cool melee weapon. Pact of the Chain effectively gives you a familiar that you can use, and you get some special stuff you get to do with that familiar. And then Pact of the Tome gives you additional cantrips and a book that you can use, kind of like a spellcasting focus kind of thing. So Pact of the Tome is just extra cantrips. The new Pact boon option that's introduced into Tasha's is Pact of the Talisman. Effectively, your patron gives you an amulet, which is a talisman. Whenever the wearer fails an ability check, they can add a d4 to the roll, potentially turning the roll into a success. The benefit can be used a number of times. You get your proficiency bonus. You get them all back on a long rest. And if you lose the talisman, you can perform a 1-hour ceremony to get another one. And it can be done during a short or long rest. And the talisman turns to ash when you die. So, effectively, the Pact of the Talisman makes it easier for you to make ability checks. Which isn't that amazing. Now, a unique thing about this is it specifically says when the wearer fails an ability check, not when you. And what that means is, effectively, you can give your talisman to another player if they need it. Now, the issue with this is there's not a ton of benefit to giving your talisman out. A D4 is nice. You effectively have a permanent bless cast on you, but it only works for ability checks. But again, a D4 is a D4. Advantage from a statistical standpoint gives you effectively a plus 3.5 to a roll. So a plus an extra D4 added to a roll is effectively giving yourself an advantage. And you can combine that with having an advantage. So, there's some benefits to it. There are new Pact Eldritch Invocations we're going to deal with that deal with the Pact of the Talisman that adds a little more of a versatility to it. But for the base aspect of it, it's really not that impressive. But as you go through the new Eldritch Invocations, maybe we'll find ways where oh no, actually that's pretty useful. So the final optional feature before we do the new Eldritch Invocations is called Eldritch Versatility. Again, most classes in Tasha's has a versatility optional feature. It effectively just lets you replace certain things, and I always like them. It allows you to course correct your build, and I always think that's a good thing, because when you build your character at level 1, or you make choices at level 3 or 4, by the time you hit level 12, you may find, wow, I've never used that ability, or I've never really, I don't play my character that way anymore, and so this is pointless for me now. Versatility allows you to change things. Specifically, anytime you get the ability score improvement feature, which is effectively every 4 levels for the most part, you can do one of the following. which is replace one cantrip you learned from Pact Magic with another one from the Warlock's spell list. So you can replace a cantrip. Always this is useful. Replace the option you chose for the Pact Boon feature with one of the feature's other options. So you can change your Pact Boon, which again can be extremely useful to a point, because a lot of Eldritch Invocations require a certain Pact. So choosing a new Pact would also invalidate some of your Pact choices. So whether or not that would be something that a lot of people use, I don't know. More likely than not, I can't remember if it's written anywhere in the rules, but if I was to allow someone to change their Pact Boon, that would also involve them being able to basically change any pact that relies on that Pact Boon. I'm gonna just check the invocations, the thing, simply because there's got to be a way to change that. Oh, that's what it is. Whenever you gain a level in the class, you can choose one invocation, replace it with another one. Yeah, you actually would need to do that. Part of leveling up would be being able to change a different thing. So if you had multiple ones for an old pact, it would take maybe a couple levels to do it, but it wouldn't be horrible. So yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And then the final one is if you're 12th level or higher, you can replace one spell for your Mystic Arcanum feature with another Warlock spell. This is the same level. Mystic Arcanum is how Warlocks handle high levels of spellcasting. Again, their spell slots from Pact Magic only go up to 5th level. So to cast 6th level or higher spells, they get what's called a Mystic Arcanum, which is basically they learn one 6th level spell, one 7th level spell, one 8th level spell, one 9th level spell, and they can cast it once, I believe, per day. I will look. It's one 6th level spell or one 7th level spell per day. Now, they get one of each. So they'll have a 6th, the 7th, and 8th, and then a 9th as they level up. But those 4 spells, they can only cast each one of those spells once per day. This Eldritch Versatility effectively allows you to change that spell if you find out, you know what, I thought this is going to be a really useful spell, but it's not. Now, the only kind of limiting factor oh wait, no, because you get one at 19th level, I believe. Yeah, so you'll your last ability score improvement you get at 19th level. So that'll be your last chance to change one of these spells if you need to before your character maxes out. So again, I like versatility options. I think they improve the game simply because, again, the character you're playing at 1st or 2nd level may be an extremely different character by the time you get to end of tier 2 or tier 3 content, and definitely by the time you get to tier 4 content. That's just the nature of, playing an RPG, and this allows you to make some course corrections. A lot of my players start out as a single class and level up, and then when they start getting to tier 3 content, they'll go, you know what? I think I want to start multi-classing. It happened with Critical Role, where Vax multi-classed into Paladin. And then again with Slights, this is spoiler alert, with Ford when he multi-classed again into Paladin. Critical Role apparently has a thing for Paladins, but only as a multi-class option. They've never had a core cast member that was actually a Paladin, which I find interesting. Yeah. So I always like that stuff, and especially if you are going to be multi-classing, you may find that things that you chose at earlier levels to kind of make your character play the way you wanted it to are now taken care of by that multi-class, and you can turn them into something else that makes your character that much more yours. So always a fan of versatility options. It was something that was built into the core rules of 4th edition, and it meant that 4th edition was one of the most difficult RPGs just in general to create a useless character in. Whereas something like 3rd edition or Pathfinder, it's remarkably simple to create a worthless character that can't do a lot of things by the time you get to anywhere between like 5th and to 10th level. You're simply just a drain on the party. It's not difficult to do it all in 3rd and 4th edition simply by not spending your skill points correctly, or not choosing the right feats to get the right advanced feats. Or not taking the right features to be able to multi-class into an advanced class, things like that. So yeah, always a fan of versatility stuff. Finally, they add a bunch of new Eldritch Invocations, a lot of which are, or some of which at least, are based around the Pact of the Talisman feature. To actually make it a little bit more viable, because again, just getting a D4 on ability checks isn't that game breaking, or isn't really that game affecting, because there's so many other ways to kind of get around weak ability checks, especially for a warlock when they have access to all this different magic. If you have a really low strength score and you have to climb up a cliff, everyone else, is making their strength athletics check, and you cast levitate on yourself, so you can just float up the cliff or the tree or whatever you want. Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to get around it. So I'm not a big fan of just giving you some ability check improvements. It's not that useful for a magic using character. So let's talk about some of them. The first one they mention here is Bond of the Talisman. You have to be a 12th level warlock to take it. And it requires the Pact of the Talisman features. So this is going to improve your talisman. When someone else is wearing your talisman, you can use your action to teleport to the unoccupied space closest to them, provided the two of you are on the same plane of existence. The wearer of your talisman can do the same thing using their action to teleport to you. And the teleportation can be used number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. Get them all back on a long rest. This is interesting, and it's really the one benefit of giving your talisman to another player, other than being able to kind of shore up an ability deficiency for another player. There's really no benefit to giving your talisman to someone else. It's going to do the most for you, and it's a it's a really important part of your class is what you choose for your Pact boon. No other Pact boon allows you to give it to another player, because it's something that your Pact Master has given specifically to you. It's kind of a reward for making it to level 3 in that class. So, yeah, there's a lot of different ways you could use a free teleport action. I've mentioned before, teleportation is super useful. This is a limited form of teleportation where it can only teleport you to one place, but it's still useful. Things like grappled and restrained and any movement conditions similar to those. are not will not affect the teleportation. So if you get grappled by a creature, you can teleport out of there. Always this is useful. I've made this comparison a fair amount before, but if you have someone sneaking behind enemy lines to scout or something like that, and they get into a really bad situation, giving them your talisman before they go can be extremely useful, because if they do get into a bad situation, or they simply just get into a situation where their one method of retreat has been cut off, they may not have been found, but things have changed and they can no longer escape. This can get them back to the party and allow you to get all the information they have in addition to saving your party member. So this can be kind of an offensive aspect thing, or a defensive aspect of the thing. You know, giving someone like a monk or a barbarian who's hyper mobile something like a bomb, or just something that they want to place into the middle of the enemies. Maybe like giving them a bead that has a darkness spell cast on it, and letting them run into the middle of enemies, drop the bead, and then teleport out, could be extremely effective and useful. Or really any spell that is tied to an object rather than a point in space. It could be really, really useful to have them go in and just use a single action to be able to teleport out. Especially with a monk, where they can do the things like use their bonus action to Step of the Wind, double their movement speed, and just go to town, getting into the middle of the bad guys, getting really, really far, and basically extending the reach of a lot of spells, and then just teleporting back out. So lots of different uses for that. Still not 100% certain. And it's a 12th level of ability, so up until that point, you can't use that, and it takes one of your Eldritch Invocations. But yeah, it's interesting, I guess, is the best way to do it. The next one is Eldritch Mind. You have advantage on Constitution saving throws you make to maintain your concentration on the spell. Always useful for spellcasting classes to have advantage on concentration checks. I don't believe that is the only way to get advantage on concentration checks, so kind of limited use, but still very useful. Far Scribe is an interesting one. It requires 5th level, and the Pact of the Tome feature. So Pact of the Tome, again, gives you extra cantrips and effectively gives you a spell book, though it doesn't work like a wizard spell book where you can copy spells into it. A new page appears in your Book of Shadows. With your permission, a creature can use its action to write its name on that page, which contains a number of names equal to your proficiency bonus. You can cast the Sending spell, targeting a creature whose name is on the page without using a spell slot and without using material components. To do so, you must write the message on the page. The target hears the message in their mind, and if the target replies, their message appears on the page rather than in your mind. The writing disappears after a minute, and you can magically erase a name on the page by touching it with an action. So, I actually had one of my players use Far Scribe. I can't remember how they had it, because this is long before Tasha's was even an announced that my player was doing this. So it must have been an Unearthed Arcana thing that I approved. But it's a super useful thing. The Sending spell itself is a massively useful spell. It's a 3rd level spell. So this is not, a cheap, just kind of throw it away kind of spell. And it's it's just incredibly useful. It can open up a line of communication that is effectively encrypted, like no one else can hear it other than the person you're sending this spell to. And yeah, it's just super useful, especially since you effectively get a 3rd level spell that you can cast at will. Like that's really useful. The only limitation is you have to have the book. But if you're a Pact of the Tome Warlock, you're going to have your book. You never leave it behind. You need it to cast those 3 cantrips you learned. So yeah, I really like Scribe, and I have actually seen it used in game, and it's a really useful ability. So, the next one is Gift of the Protectors. It's a 9th level. It requires to be 9th level, and it's another Pact of the Tome. This is another one where a creature can use its action to write its name on a new page that appears in your Book of Shadows. And it can, this page can contain a number of names equal to your proficiency bonus, which I think is the same. Yeah, it's the same as the Scribe as well. So at lower levels, you're only going to be able to have a couple of your party members. But as you get to higher levels, you can have everyone's name in there. The thing with Gift of the Protectors is when any creature whose name is on the page is reduced to 0 hit points but not killed outright, the creature magically drops to 1 hit point instead. And once this magic is triggered, no creature can benefit from it until you finish a long rest. And as an action, you can magically erase a name on the page by touching it. So this is super cool. It turns the Pact of the Tome into a really useful thing, because this is a get out of death free card. And as a clarification, it says a creature can use its action. It doesn't say a different creature. So you can write your own name into your book to benefit from this. And yeah, because of how it is worded, the creature magically drops to 1 hit point instead. This can be an extremely useful way to get around the effects of things like a disintegration spell. Disintegration, when you drop to 0 hit points, you did disintegrate. You are instantly killed. Because of this, and there's no body to resurrect. There's a fine powder there. So resurrecting someone that has been disintegrated is significantly more difficult than just casting Revivify or something like that. With this, because you drop to 1 hit point instead, it avoids that completely. Meaning that aspect never happens, and this can literally not just save the party from having to revive a teammate, but it can literally save a character. So massively useful. The one limitation to it is this is not a choice. It is when any creature whose name is on that page is reduced to 0 hit points, but not killed outright. So it's not like, someone can get, taken to 0 hit points and they go, you know what? I'm not going to use this because I'm going to be fine. This is the first person that gets taken to 0 hit points, uses it, and makes it so no one else can use it. So that limitation does make it slightly less useful, but only slightly so. That is still a get out of death free card. There are so many situations where that is a massively useful ability. So I really like that. I think it's really interesting. The next invocation is Investment of the Chainmaster. This requires the Pact of the Chain. When you cast Find Familiar, which is what Pact of the Chain does, you infuse a summon familiar with a measure of your Eldritch power, granting them the following benefits. So it gets all of these. Your familiar gains either a flying speed or a swimming speed, your choice, of 40 feet. As a bonus action, you can command the familiar to take the attack action. Familiar's weapon attacks are considered magical for the purpose of overcoming immunity and resistance. If the familiar forces a creature to make a saving throw, it uses your spell save to DC, not its. And when the familiar takes damage, you can use your reaction to grant it resistance against that damage. So the Pact of the Chain feature gives you a few new options you can use as far as the familiar. But in general, familiars are not really designed to make like your wizard a pet class, like a Beastmaster fighter is. Really, all of a familiar is designed to do is kind of expand your casting ability. It's not itself a separate character. In as much as, you know, you're not actually playing two characters on the battlefield. What it is it expands your spell range because you can generally cast spells from the familiar's position, and they will basically augment your own abilities, but they really normally can't be considered a different creature. They're just an extension of your magic power. This, however, does turn them much more into a a pet that can actually do things. First of all, it turns your bonus action into an attack. Now, most familiars that do have an attack are not going to do a ton of damage. Like maybe a D6 plus a modifier. That's it. They're not meant to be huge damage dealing classes. And they're not going to have multi-attack or anything like that. So you're only getting one kind of low damage attack, but it's still an attack, and you get to translate your bonus action into actual damage. And over over multiple rounds, that can turn into a decent amount of damage. In addition to that, things like being able forcing creatures to be able to make concentration saves because of taking damage and things like that. That's always useful. And we talk about action economy all the time in 5th edition because it's a huge part of combat balance. Basically, whichever side has more things they can do during a turn, they have the advantage. And this is effectively making it so as long as you have your familiar out, you are always able to use your bonus action. There will never be a turn when you're not able to use your bonus action to do something significant. Yeah, that's really, really useful. And then being able to give them resistance against the damage, that can be useful. However, familiars generally don't have a lot of hit points. A lot of them are single digits or maybe low double digits. So, yeah, the resistance probably will mean instead of being one shot, it'll take 2 hits to kill them. Which, due to the fact that your familiar can now attack regularly, might be a viable option for your enemies to start attacking your familiar instead of you, simply because a familiar is weak, it's easy to take out, and once it's taken out, you are severely limiting one of the enemy characters by taking away probably their most used bonus actions. So yeah, it's kind of useful. I don't know if it's super duper useful, but it fits. So overall, I like that. It lets you play your Warlock very differently, which I always support. Next one, Protection of the Talisman. This one requires 7th level Warlock and the Pact of the Talisman. So this is going to improve your Talisman in some way. And this one effectively, when you fail a saving throw, you can add your D4 to it. So it's basically making it so now, in addition to your ability checks, you can also use it for saving throws. And it works the same way. You can use this a number of times equals your proficiency bonus, get them all back on a long rest. Because this is a different feature, the way I read it would mean that using your talisman to aid your ability checks is a completely separate number of uses to using it for saving throws. So let's say your proficiency bonus is the 3. Between long rests, you could improve 3 ability checks and 3 saving throws, making the Pact of the Talisman significantly more useful because saving throws are just a lot more useful to make your saves from. To be blunt, they're really useful for that. So, yeah. Next one is Rebuke of the Talisman. Which is when the wearer of your talisman is hit by an attacker you can see within the 30 feet of you, you could use your reaction to deal psychic damage to the attacker equal to your proficiency bonus and push it up to 10 feet away from the talisman's wearer. This just requires the Pact of the Talisman, so there's no level requirement on it. And this makes the talisman really different. First of all, it's your reaction. It gives you a way to use your reaction, which again, in 5th edition, a lot of classes don't have a ton of reaction abilities. Most people, when they think of your reaction, they think of opportunity attacks, which are not that common in 5th edition. In something like 4th edition, or not 4th, the 3rd edition and Pathfinder, the prone condition, standing up from prone would provoke opportunity attacks. So opportunity attacks were significantly more common in the 3rd edition and Pathfinder. In 5th edition, they just aren't. This gives you a use for your reaction, which is always good. It requires you to get hit, but yeah, that's going to happen. The wording is a little bit weird because it simply says when the wearer of your talisman is hit by an attacker. It doesn't say when they take damage from something or when an attack hits them. So that can mean a lot of different things, but basically, to me, it seems like anytime a bad guy does something that affects an ally, you can use this. Or does something to whoever is wearing the talisman, whether it's you or someone else, you can use this. Yeah, not only does it do a little bit of damage, which again isn't that big a deal, but it's the damage. You know, at max charisma, which is your spellcasting modifier for a warlock, that's an extra 5 damage that wasn't going to exist any other way. However, you also get to push it 10 feet away from the talisman's wearer, which becomes incredibly useful at high levels, simply because the way that they deal with the additional hit points and things like that when you're facing monsters, and just how powerful you become as characters, is monsters get multi-attack. And that's how they continue to balance encounters, where, again, action economy, whichever side has more actions, is going to have the advantage. With multi-attack, that turns a single attack action into multiple. So looking at monsters when you're creating encounters and looking at their multi-attack and how many additional attacks that they get is an important part of balance. With the fact that you can now push someone 10 feet away as a reaction, that can end multi-attacks. If they have to use most of their movement to get to you, or all their movement to get to you, and they have the multi-attack feature, They make their first attack, you push them away, they don't have enough movement to come back and make their other two attacks. So this particular ability could be used. It's not going to be used quite as often at lower levels for this because low-level monsters don't have multi-attack. But once you start using dealing with multi-attack, which starts right at tier 2, like once you hit 5th level, you're going to be dealing with creatures with multi-attack. It's just how the balance works. This could be incredibly useful in effectively preventing the enemy from getting all of the actions they are supposed to get. Because now, as long as you're attacking from range and forcing them to come to you, as soon as they hit you once, you can blow them away. And that's super, super useful. It's definitely a control ability, and it directly could impact the action economy. Now, it does mean that you're going to have to play your Warlock very tactically, because the way this is going to be most beneficial is making sure that you are at the edge of the attack range of melee attackers, so you can push them away. It does mean a Pact of the Talisman Warlock, though, may be it may be in the party's best interest for your Pact of the Talisman Warlock to actually invite people to attack it. Most Warlocks in general are going to do their best to stay back and attack from range, unless you're like a Hexblade or a Pact of the Blade Warlock. You're generally not going to be wading into fights because you have a low AC, you have low hit points. It's just not worth it for you. But a Pact of the Talisman Warlock would get a lot of benefit from encouraging the enemy to attack them if the enemy has multi-attack, simply because you could waste some of the attacks. So this one Eldritch Invocation could massively change how you play your Warlock, and actually make the Warlock itself, from a tactical perspective, significantly more complex a character to run in combat, because gauging how far a creature can move will become essential in figuring out how useful this ability is going to be. So yeah, just a really, really interesting thing that can be done. So excuse me for just a second. I did a long recording session yesterday, and my voice is still angry at me. So, yes, the final new Eldritch Invocation is called Undying Servitude, which is basically you can cast Animate Dead without using a spell slot. Once you do so, you can't cast it this way again until you finish a long rest. Yeah. Animate Dead is an interesting spell in general. First of all, it's a 3rd level spell. It requires a 5th level Warlock. I can't remember if I said that for Undying Servitude. So it's a 3rd level spell, which again, 3rd level is when spells start getting tricky. And basically it creates a pet for you. You get either a skeleton or a zombie. The big difference being the skeleton does a little bit more damage and actually has a ranged attack, and also has a higher armor class of 13, versus the zombie, which only has an armor class of 8, but has higher hit points and actually has a feature called Undead Fortitude, which is basically if damage reduces a zombie to 0 hit points, it makes a con save with a DC of 5 plus the damage taken, unless the damage is radiant or from a critical hit. And on a success, the zombie drops to 1 hit point instead. So killing a zombie can be remarkably difficult, even with this low armor class, because if you're not doing, high damage spells, which to kill a zombie with like a 50 hit point attack is kind of a waste of that attack. A lot of people, especially when you get to higher levels, are not going to waste a good attack on a zombie. So, yeah, that choice between a skeleton and a zombie is made based on whether you animate a pile of bones or a corpse. But the interesting thing about Animate Dead is it lasts. You can control this creature for 24 hours. At the end of the 24 hours, it stops listening to you and just becomes a normal undead. However, if you cast the spell again before 24 hours are up, there's no save or anything. You just get to keep your new pet. And the other interesting thing is, as a bonus action on your turn, you can mentally command any creature you made with a spell. If the creature is within 60 feet of you, you decide what actions a creature will take and where it will move during its next turn. Or you can issue a general command, such as guard a particular chamber or corridor. If you issue no commands, the creature only defends itself against hostile creatures, and once given an order, the creature continues to follow it until the task is complete. So, if you combine Undying Servitude with investment of the Chain Master, you can give your undead creature a command instead of controlling it with your bonus action. But that command could be kill that creature. Every subsequent turn afterwards, the undead, the Animate Dead servant is going to continue attacking that creature, but because you've told it to kill the creature. Or you could just say attack that creature, and it will just continue attacking, meaning one bonus action can last for multiple rounds for your Undying Servitude servant, and then your other ones can be used on your fine familiar, meaning effectively you can now have 2 pets instead of 1. Now, like I said before, zombies and skeletons do not do a lot of damage. Skeletons do 5 damage per hit. They do a d6 plus 2 damage, and they only have a +4 to their hit. Zombies only have a +3 to their hit, and they only do a d6 plus 1 damage. However, that's still additional damage. And because you can just issue a command instead of using your bonus action, that's additional damage that you don't have to waste an action, any kind of action. That's just free actions for your party. Now, the higher your level, the less useful this is going to be. But due to bounded accuracy, enemy armor classes don't become unhittable by a +4 to an attack. Your skeleton, your zombie, is going to fail a lot with these attacks as you get to higher levels. But they're still going to hit enough. Especially if you do things to give them advantage and things like that. They can actually hit on a fairly regular basis, because even high-level monsters are still going to be having armor classes between like 16 and 20. Which means with a +4 to hit for an armor class of 20, that means they need to roll a 14 or higher. So it's a little over to 25% success rate. However, if it's only a 16, they only need 11 or higher to hit. So that's effectively a 50% hit rate for a single bonus action. And depending on how how your DM interprets the commands and things like that, you may not have to use another bonus action until the end of combat. So, yeah, this can be incredibly useful for just, again, adding more abilities, more actions to your side in combat. And if you use them correctly, they can do a lot, especially with the skeleton having a ranged attack. The skeleton doesn't actually have to get into the bad situation of having to get right up to the enemy. Their short bow, which is their ranged attack, has a range of 80, short range of 80, and a long range of 320. Your skeleton can just sit in the back lobbing arrows at the enemy constantly, and very rarely, if ever, have to worry about getting hit. It only has the 13 hit points, but if it's 80 feet away from the bad guy, and it's only doing 5 points of damage, a lot of times the enemies aren't going to really worry about it. Why waste a spell, especially if you sequester your skeleton far enough away from the party that it can't be targeted by a spell that hits another party member? So there's really almost no benefit to the enemy wasting an entire spell on your skeleton. And yeah, like, it's just like the whole thing is just really an interesting thing. Wow, this has become an hour-long video, despite the fact that my intention was not to do that. Yeah. So anyway, let's do final thoughts. Overall, I love the additional Warlock spells. I love the fact that I think almost every new spell into Tasha's is in here, and they're all really cool and interesting. The Pact of the Talisman at its base value is kind of pointless. I'm not a big fan of it. Once you use the Eldritch Invocations that specifically affect the Talisman, I think it becomes significantly more useful. Especially Rebuke of the Talisman, which you can take right when you take your Pact boon at the third level, which is really useful. Yeah, I think Pact of the Talisman would definitely be a Warlock that has to kind of be built around their Pact boon, as opposed to other ones where you can kind of build your own Warlock, and then the Pact boon can just kind of fit into an already created build. Pact of the Talisman really does need to be built around that to the Talisman, but I think it can create some really interesting, unique ways to play a Warlock. I'm always a fan of the versatility stuff, and the other invocations that they have in here are super interesting. And specifically the new Pact of the Tome features, I think, are massively useful. And they really give you a large benefit to becoming a Pact of the Tome Warlock. A lot of people that go Warlock, I tend to see a lot of Pact of the Blade Warlocks. Pact of the Tome, like the additional cantrips are useful, especially since you can get them from anywhere. But I don't really see a lot of Tome Warlocks ever using their Tome, other than, I have 3 extra cantrips. And this will give them just so much more versatility to their Tome. And then the investment of the Chainmaster, I think, is super cool as well. So overall, Warlock may be my favorite list of optional class features in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I think almost all of the options add interesting, unique ways to use your character. It gives you interesting choices. None of them feel overpowered or broken or anything like that. Yeah. So anyway, that is going to be all for me today. As always, if you enjoy this, please hit that little like button. I'm starting to find a lot more new people are seeing this stuff, and I'm actually seeing my videos suggested to me when I'm watching YouTube videos. That's a really big deal. I've never had my videos suggested to me before, and it's entirely because you guys are doing things like liking the videos, subscribing to the channel. Please subscribe. And commenting. All of that stuff lets YouTube know that other people will probably interact with this content, and that's what they will want. So please like it. Please subscribe. Hit the notification bell and turn notifications on, because every so often, even if you do subscribe, YouTube will forget to send my videos out, or sometimes I put out videos at weird times. My mind is not very nice to me, and so yeah, I sometimes I'll just upload at random times, and if you have notifications on, you never have to worry about missing anything that I put out. In the comments below, I want to know your guys' opinion specifically of the Pact of the Talisman. Just reading the base class I've already mentioned, I don't think it's that useful, but with the invocations and stuff like that, it becomes kind of interesting. So I'd be curious to hear what you guys think of the Pact of the Talisman. Would you guys want to create a Talisman Warlock? Are you thinking even with the invocations, it's just not useful enough for your particular playstyle? Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, that's all for me today, and I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye!